Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, a mother of two, a wife of a freedom fighter, the First Lady of South Africa, and the mother of a nation. All these titles describe this fierce woman, but they don't tell the whole story. Unlike Mandela, her story isn't about forgiveness, but revenge. Winnie organized a League of Women to fight against the might of the apartheid government. She wasn't just a mother to her two daughters, but to the entire liberation movement. And one thing about mothers is you don't mess with their children. Let me tell you, how Winnie later turned out was not how she started. She was born in a Xhosa royal family in Pondoland on September 26, 1936. Winnie had 7 sisters and 1 brother. Compared to the other black families, her childhood was relatively easy. She was raised by both parents, who were teachers. After finishing school, she earned a degree of social work in 1956. Remember, she wanted to work as a social worker, a profession dedicated to helping people who are experiencing hardship. From an early age, Winnie cared for people. She wanted to help, not destroy. Her first 20 years were peaceful, but the next 40 years were filled with love, struggle, anger, and battle. This all began when she married Nelson Mandela in 1958. In that same year, she had her first child, Zenin, and in 1960, she had a second child, Zendizwe. By 1963, after just 5 years in the marriage, Nelson Mandela was arrested. And for the next 27 years, he would spend in prison. Winnie, at the age of 27, was left alone to raise 2 young children. She chose to continue Mandela's work with the ANC. She decided to take the dangerous road of supporting a banned organization. Winnie, by this time, was arrested a lot of times by the apartheid government. They placed her under house arrest, surveillance, bans, and if all that failed, they imprisoned her. On May 12, 1969, South African security police arrested Winnie in her home in Soweto in front of her 2 daughters, aged 9 and 10. They arrested her under the Terrorism Act. This law allowed the police to detain anyone for 90 days without charge or lawyer representation. Winnie spent 491 days in a prison cell, most of it in solitary confinement. From May 12, 1969 to September 14, 1970. This was her longest imprisonment, during which she was tortured and isolated. To put this in perspective, Mandela, in his first sentence, chose to wear long pants and was sent to solitary confinement for 2 weeks. He eventually broke and decided to wear short pants to avoid solitary confinement. But Winnie, on the other hand, she survived a year in solitary confinement. How did she do it? During this time, her children were sent to boarding school in Swaziland, now known as Eswatini. In that period, Winnie became known for her radical and brutal actions against anyone who sided with the apartheid government. These were actions she believed that were necessary to stand against the regime that was committing atrocities itself. After 491 days of torture and harassment, Winnie came out of prison hardened. In 1975, when she was sent back to prison, she sent a letter to Nelson, who was in prison in Robben Island. She wrote that she no longer feared prison. Her experiences had hardened her. After her release, Winnie's influence over the black communities in Soweto grew stronger. She was leading protests and defying apartheid laws with little concern over prison. After the Soweto uprising on June 16, 1976, the government had no choice but to take her off Soweto and banish her to Brentford, a small, isolated town on the Orange Free State, far from any urban center like Johannesburg. They had hoped to neutralize her political power and influence, but Winnie did not stop organizing with non-government organizations like Operation Hunger, and she even set up a clinic in Brentford. Despite the constant harassment from the apartheid police, Winnie stayed in Brentford from 1977 to 1985. But after her house was firebombed, Winnie returned to Soweto, and she returned with fire. And by fire, I mean neck lashing, a brutal practice where people were burnt alive using rubber and petrol. Winnie endorsed it, saying in a speech, "With our boxes of matches and our lashes, we shall liberate the country." In the late 1980s, as the ANC and the apartheid government were negotiating for a new South Africa, allegations were brought to court against Winnie, accusing her of involvement in killings and kidnappings of the people she deemed as spies for the apartheid government. I haven't looked into these cases, but it's clear that Winnie was holding a lot of power, and with great power comes great responsibility. In her own way, Winnie played a crucial role in winning freedom for South Africa. She was a mother dragon, not only caring for her two eggs, but protecting the entire nest. Winnie Mandela was, in every sense of the word, a badass.